The morning coffee in Ambassador David Stone's cup had gone cold 3 hours ago, but he hadn't noticed. He sat in the ornate waiting chamber outside the Grand Council Hall of the Centauri Trade Summit, watching alien delegates glide past in their ceremonial robes and floating platforms. Some wore breathing apparatus that hissed softly. Others moved on multiple legs that clicked against the polished floor. A few didn't move at all, their consciousness housed in crystalline structures that hummed with energy. All of them ignored the human delegation completely. Stone had been Earth's primary ambassador to the Galactic Coalition for 15 years. He had attended hundreds of these meetings, signed thousands of documents, and shaken hands with creatures that didn't even have hands. In all that time, nothing had really changed. Humanity remained exactly where they had been placed 3 centuries ago when they first made contact with galactic civilization, on the bottom rung of a very tall ladder. The door chimed, and his aide, Robert Kim, approached with a data pad. "Sir, the morning session results are in." Stone accepted the device without looking up from his cold coffee. "Let me guess. The Altarians got exclusive trading rights to the Vega system. The Valdorians secured another military contract, and humanity got another seat on the Agricultural Advisory Committee." "Actually, sir, it's worse than that." Robert's voice carried a tone Stone had learned to dread. "They rejected our proposal for the Agricultural Committee, said humans lack the necessary patience for long-term crop planning." Stone finally looked up. Through the massive viewing window, he could see the blue-green planet of Centauri Prime spinning slowly in space. Somewhere down there, human farmers were growing crops that fed half the local sector. Human engineers were maintaining the terraforming equipment that kept the atmosphere stable. Human doctors were treating diseases that had killed millions before Earth's medical knowledge arrived. But humanity lacked patience. "What about the infrastructure project on Kepler Station?" Stone asked, though he already knew the answer from Robert's expression. "Awarded to the Betelgeuse Construction Guild. The committee said human engineering methods were too aggressive and unpredictable." Robert sat down heavily in the chair next to Stone. "Sir, we designed the original station framework. Our people built 70% of the current structure." Stone scrolled through the data pad, reading report after report of opportunities denied, proposals rejected, and contributions dismissed. The pattern was always the same. Humans did the work, aliens got the credit, and everyone pretended this was the natural order of things. A soft chime announced the afternoon session. Stone watched the alien delegates file back into the Grand Council Hall. The Altarian delegation moved with their characteristic grace, their tall blue forms seemingly floating rather than walking. Their leader, Prime Minister Valdris, had made several jokes during the morning session about human emotional instability, the same human emotions that had driven Earth's people to volunteer for dangerous missions to protect Altarian colonies from pirate attacks. The Valdorian contingent followed, their crystalline exoskeletons catching the light. Counselor Thex had spent an hour explaining why human scientific achievements were mere accidents of a chaotic approach to research. The same chaotic approach that had produced the quantum fold technology now used by every ship in the Coalition fleet. Stone stood and straightened his formal diplomatic jacket. The weight of 3 centuries of accumulated frustration sat heavy on his shoulders. His great-great-grandmother had been part of the first human delegation to make contact with galactic civilization. She had written in her journals about the wonder of discovering they were not alone in the universe, the excitement of joining something greater than Earth itself. But she had also written about the small slights, the casual dismissals, the way alien diplomats would discuss humans as if they weren't in the room. Stone carried copies of those journals with him everywhere, a reminder of how little had changed. Inside the Grand Council Hall, Stone took his seat in the section reserved for probationary species. The term always made his jaw clench. 300 years, and humanity was still on probation, still proving themselves worthy of a civilization that would collapse without their contributions. The session began with the same ritual it always did. Recognition of elder species, acknowledgement of established hierarchies, ritual dismissal of younger civilizations as observers rather than participants. Stone had memorized every word. Then came the vote on Inner Council membership. The Inner Council made the real decisions that affected the entire galaxy. Trade policies, military deployments, resource allocation, and territorial disputes all flowed through their chambers. Humanity had applied for membership every decade since joining the coalition. The results were announced in the same calm, diplomatic tone used for weather reports. The Zentorian Empire, approved for renewed membership. The Sigma Draconis Republic, approved for renewed membership. Humanity, rejected for continued emotional instability and warlike tendencies. Stone felt something snap inside his chest. Not break, but snap back into place, like a rubber band that had been stretched too far for too long. He stood up slowly, ignoring the surprised looks from nearby delegates. Protocol demanded he remain seated until the session ended. Protocol demanded he accept the decision with diplomatic grace. Protocol demanded he thank the Council for their consideration and promise to try harder next year. Stone walked to the center of the hall. His footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. Every eye, sensor, and consciousness in the chamber focused on him. In 3 centuries of diplomatic contact, no human had ever disrupted a council session. Esteemed delegates, Stone began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. I have an announcement regarding humanity's relationship with the Galactic Coalition. Prime Minister Valdris leaned forward in her floating chair. Ambassador Stone, this is highly irregular. You do not have the floor. You're right, Stone replied. I don't have the floor. I don't have a voice in your inner council. I don't have equal representation despite equal contribution. What I do have is a message from the government of Earth and all human colonies. The chamber remained silent. Stone could feel the weight of history pressing down on the moment. Every slight his ancestors had endured, every contribution that had been dismissed, every time humanity had been told they weren't ready for responsibility while being asked to shoulder the hardest burdens. Effective immediately, humanity formally withdraws from all coalition treaties, agreements, and obligations. We resign our probationary membership. We decline future participation in this organization. The silence stretched for nearly a minute. Then Counselor Thex's translated voice filled the air. Ambassador Stone, surely you don't mean to suggest that humanity would abandon 3 centuries of diplomatic progress over a simple membership vote? Stone smiled for the first time in years. Counselor Thex, humanity is done asking permission to exist as equals in a galaxy we help defend, feed, and maintain. We're going home to consider our options. He turned and walked toward the exit, Robert hurrying to catch up. Behind them, the chamber erupted in dozens of languages as delegates tried to process what had just happened. Stone didn't look back. As the door closed behind them, Robert whispered, "Sir, what happens now?" Stone pulled out his communication device and sent a single coded message to Earth. 3 words that would change the galaxy forever. Patience protocol terminated. 3 weeks after humanity's withdrawal from the coalition, Admiral Lisa Chen received the strangest order of her career. She was to take her small patrol fleet to the edge of human space and wait for visitors. When she asked Command for clarification, they told her to trust the plan and keep her weapons powered but not targeted. Chen had spent 30 years in Earth's Navy, fighting pirates and protecting trade routes that other species considered too dangerous. She had learned not to question unusual orders, especially ones that came directly from Fleet Command with the President's personal seal. Her flagship, the UES Defiance, was nothing impressive by galactic standards. A heavy cruiser built with mostly human technology, supplemented by coalition systems that Earth had been allowed to purchase at inflated prices. Like most human vessels, it looked primitive, compared to the sleek alien designs that dominated space lanes. The waiting ended when her sensor officer, Lieutenant Tom Martinez, called out from his station. "Admiral, we have contacts approaching. Multiple vessels, mixed configurations. They're broadcasting coalition identification codes." Chen moved to the main display. "How many ships, Lieutenant?" 14 vessels, ma'am. Looks like a full investigation. Fleet. 3 dreadnoughts, 6 cruisers, 5 support ships. They're requesting permission to enter human space for diplomatic purposes." Chen smiled. After 3 centuries of being treated like children, the Coalition was finally coming to humanity's territory to ask questions. "Open a channel, Lieutenant. Let's see what they want." The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of a massive Tellurian vessel. Commander Keth of the Tellurian Navy appeared in full ceremonial armor, his 4 arms positioned in what humans had learned was a gesture of authority among his species. "Admiral Chen of Earth's Navy." Keth's voice carried the usual tone of superiority that Chen had grown tired of. "By order of the Galactic Coalition Council, you will permit our fleet to conduct a standard inspection of human military capabilities and territorial claims." Chen kept her expression neutral. "Commander Keth, I'm afraid I don't recognize the Coalition's authority to conduct inspections in sovereign human space. However, I'm authorized to escort your fleet to a designated meeting point where we can discuss your concerns." Keth's expression shifted to what humans had learned indicated confusion among Tellurians. "Admiral Chen, perhaps you misunderstand the situation. The Coalition Council requires assurance that humanity's withdrawal from diplomatic relations does not represent a threat to galactic stability." "I understand perfectly, Commander." Chen signaled to her communications officer to open a fleet-wide channel. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen. Implement escort formation Delta. Our guests are about to receive a guided tour." The next few hours changed everything the Coalition thought they knew about human military capabilities. As Chen's small fleet moved deeper into human space, Keth's confident demeanor slowly crumbled. His sensors began detecting things that shouldn't exist. Hidden weapons platforms appeared from behind asteroids. Ships that looked like cargo haulers suddenly displayed weapon signatures that made his dreadnoughts seem like patrol boats. "Admiral Chen," Keth's voice had lost its commanding tone, "our sensors are detecting military installations that were not reported in any Coalition database." Chen appeared on his screen, sitting relaxedly in her command chair. "That's correct. Commander, humanity never reported many things to the Coalition. We weren't required to, and nobody ever asked." The revelation began slowly, then accelerated as Keth's fleet moved deeper into what they had assumed was lightly defended space. Asteroid mining stations revealed themselves as disguised shipyards. Peaceful research facilities powered up defensive, systems that made Coalition technology look ancient. Lieutenant Martinez called out updates that Keth could hear clearly over the open channel. "Admiral, the Titan yards are reporting ready status. All 12 construction bays are operational. The new Sovereign-class ships are ready for deployment if needed." Chen nodded calmly. "Thank you, Lieutenant." "Commander Keth, I believe your people are interested in understanding humanity's current military posture." Keth's 4 arms trembled slightly. "Admiral, the Coalition was not aware that humanity possessed advanced construction capabilities. The Coalition was not aware of many things, Commander. 300 years of being dismissed as primitive tends to encourage privacy." Chen's tone remained pleasant, but something cold flickered in her eyes. "Every time your people called our technology crude, we were taking notes. Every time you excluded us from advanced research projects, we started our own." The tour continued. Chen's fleet escorted the increasingly nervous Coalition vessels past installations that redefined what they thought they knew about human capabilities. Orbital defense platforms that had been invisible to sensors suddenly appeared on scans. Patrol craft that seemed outdated revealed engine signatures indicating speeds that should have been impossible. Commander Keth finally requested a private channel. When the connection was established, his formal military bearing had completely disappeared. Admiral Chen, I must ask directly, how long has humanity possessed these capabilities? Chen leaned back in her chair. Commander, humans have been working for 3 centuries. We've been learning, building, and preparing while your coalition held meetings about whether we were mature enough to handle responsibility. Did you really think we were sitting idle? But the technology assessments, the capability reports your government submitted? Keth's voice trailed off. Were completely accurate, Commander. We reported exactly what we were required to report, nothing more. Humanity has always preferred to under-promise and over-deliver. Chen gestured to her. Tactical display. Your assessment teams only ever examined the equipment we used for coalition joint operations. They never looked at what we kept for ourselves. The final revelation came when Chen's fleet reached the Titan Yards, humanity's primary shipbuilding facility. Keth's sensors detected something that made his tactical officer call out in alarm. Dozens of ships unlike anything in the Coalition database were docked at the massive station, sleek, deadly vessels that looked like they had been designed by someone who understood war in ways the Coalition had forgotten. Admiral Chen. Keth's voice was barely above a whisper. What are those ships? Chen smiled for the first time during the entire encounter. Those, Commander, are humanity's answer to 3 centuries of patience. We call them the Sovereign class. They represent everything we learned while your people were busy explaining why we weren't ready for advanced technology. She paused, letting the implications sink in. Commander Keth, I want you to return to the Coalition Council with a message. Tell them that humanity spent 300 years learning how to build, how to fight, and how to survive in a galaxy that didn't want us as equals. Tell them we're no longer interested in asking permission. Chen stood up from her command chair, her image filling Keth's main screen. Most importantly, Commander, tell them this. They're about to discover what happens when the species they dismissed as primitive and emotional turns out to be the most patient and methodical builders in the galaxy. The channel closed, leaving Keth staring at a blank screen while his sensors continued cataloging human military assets that shouldn't exist. Around his flagship, the most powerful fleet the Coalition had assembled in decades suddenly felt very small and very vulnerable. As Chen watched the Coalition fleet begin its journey home, she opened a communication to Earth Command. Admiral Chen to Fleet Command. The revelation phase is complete. They know we're not the same species they've been dismissing, awaiting orders for the next phase. The response came back immediately. Proceed to demonstration phase. It's time to show them what human patience actually built. Dr. Emily Watson had always been fascinated by alien technology, but not for the reasons her Coalition colleagues assumed. While other scientists marveled at the elegant designs and advanced capabilities, Emily studied the flaws. Every system had them. Every network had weak points. Every seemingly perfect alien creation had been built by minds that thought in predictable patterns. Now, sitting in her laboratory deep beneath Luna's surface, Emily was about to demonstrate why human curiosity was more dangerous than alien arrogance. The Coalition's response to humanity's withdrawal had been exactly what Emily's team had predicted. Trade sanctions, diplomatic pressure, and threats of military action if humans didn't return to their proper place in the galactic hierarchy. What they hadn't expected was humanity's response. Silence, no angry broadcasts, no military mobilization, no desperate attempts to negotiate, just silence while human ships quietly disappeared from Coalition space and human personnel stopped reporting to their assigned positions. Emily's communication device chimed. The message was simple. Phase 3 approved. Show them what we learned. She turned to her team of 12 specialists. Each one had spent years working within Coalition systems, learning how alien technology functioned, studying its limitations, and mapping its vulnerabilities. All right, everyone. It's time to demonstrate the difference between being primitive and being underestimated. The first target was the Nexus Trade Station, the economic heart of Coalition space. For 2 centuries, Nexus had processed millions of transactions per day, coordinating trade between hundreds of worlds and dozens of species. Its quantum computing systems were considered unhackable by Coalition standards. Those standards hadn't accounted for human creativity. Emily's colleague, Dr. Marcus Thompson, had spent 15 years as a systems analyst at Nexus. During that time, he had quietly documented every security protocol, every system update, and every administrative backdoor. He had also noticed something interesting. The Coalition's definition of security relied heavily on complexity rather than actual protection. "Marcus, are you ready?" Emily asked. Marcus nodded from his workstation. "The beauty of their system is that it's so complicated, they never question why certain processes take the time they do. I've been running diagnostic routines for months that weren't actually diagnostics." His fingers moved across his keyboard with practiced precision. To any observer, he was simply running routine maintenance on systems he had helped design. The reality, he was implementing changes that had been planned for years. Within 6 hours, the Nexus Trade Station began experiencing what its administrators called minor glitches, transaction delays, routing errors, and database synchronization issues that seemed random but followed patterns only humans could detect. Commander Ryan Brooks was implementing a different kind of demonstration on the other side of Coalition, space. His specialty was what humans called direct action, though aliens would have used less polite terms. Ryan had spent 10 years training Coalition security forces in counterterrorism tactics. He had taught them how to recognize human infiltration, methods, how to detect human sabotage techniques, and how to defend against human unconventional warfare. What he hadn't taught them was that humans were always developing new methods faster than they could learn to counter the old ones. His target was the Betelgeuse Defense Platform, a massive military installation that protected one of the Coalition's most important industrial systems. The platform's security was based on alien psychology, layers of sensors, multiple checkpoints, and automated systems designed to detect threats that thought like aliens. They weren't designed to detect threats that thought like humans. Ryan's insertion team consisted of 6 people who had all worked legitimate jobs on the platform at various times. They knew the schedules, the blind spots, and the assumptions that governed daily operations. Most importantly, they knew that Coalition security forces had been trained to look for obvious threats, not subtle manipulation. The infiltration took 3 days. Not because it was difficult, but because Ryan wanted to be thorough. His team didn't disable security systems or fight their way to objectives. Instead, they made small adjustments to routine operations that would cascade into larger problems over time. Environmental systems received new calibration parameters that would slowly degrade air quality in specific sections. Power distribution. Networks were reprogrammed with efficiency algorithms that looked beneficial but would create critical overloads during peak demand. Navigation beacons were adjusted by fractions of degrees that wouldn't affect normal traffic, but would cause problems for military formations. Meanwhile, Captain Alex Torres was conducting humanity's most visible demonstration aboard his frigate, the UES Persistence. His orders were simple. Find a Coalition military patrol and show them what human engineering could do in direct combat. Torres had volunteered for what most of his crew considered a suicide mission. The Coalition had 3 centuries of military experience against dozens of species. Their tactics were proven, their technology was advanced, and their ships were designed by the finest military minds in the galaxy. But those military minds had never faced an opponent who had studied every one of their battles, analyzed every tactical doctrine, and spent decades preparing for this exact moment. The encounter came near the Vega system, where a Tellurian patrol group was investigating reports of human military activity. 4 Coalition vessels against 1 human frigate. By every conventional measure, Torres was outnumbered and outgunned. The battle lasted 17 minutes. Torres didn't fight the way Coalition tacticians expected. Instead of engaging in traditional ship-to-ship combat, he used tactics that seemed impossible to alien minds. His ship appeared on sensors, then vanished. It struck from unexpected angles with weapons that shouldn't have been able to penetrate Coalition shields. Most confusing of all, it seemed to know exactly where Coalition ships would be before they got there. The first Tellurian vessel surrendered after its main engines failed, and its weapon systems began targeting its own escorts. The second lost power when its fusion reactor started cycling through shutdown sequences that couldn't be overridden. The third found its navigation systems convinced it was spinning uncontrollably, making coordinated combat impossible. The fourth vessel, commanded by Captain Venth, opened a communication channel. Human vessel. By what technology do you achieve these effects? Torres appeared on Venth's screen, sitting calmly in his command chair, while status displays showed his ship operating at optimal efficiency. Captain Venth, we're using the same technology your people dismissed as primitive for 3 centuries. We simply learned to use it better. This is impossible, Venth protested. Our shields are rated against all known human weapons. Your shields are rated against the weapons we used in joint coalition exercises, Torres corrected. They were never tested against the weapons we developed in private. Captain, your people spent 300 years telling us our technology was inferior. We spent that same time learning why your technology was limited. Across coalition space, similar demonstrations were occurring. Human teams that had been dismissed as maintenance workers revealed themselves as saboteurs. Scientists who had been ignored were implementing changes that brought critical systems to their knees. Soldiers who had been considered inferior were winning battles that should have been impossible. But the real message wasn't in any single action. It was in the coordination, the precision, and the clear evidence that humanity had been planning this for a very long time. Emily watched status reports flood in from across the galaxy. Power grids failing, communications networks degrading, military systems malfunctioning, and trade platforms experiencing cascading errors. Each problem was small by itself, but together they painted a clear picture. Dr. Watson, one of her assistants called out. We're receiving surrender requests from 14 coalition installations. They're asking what they need to do to restore normal operations. Emily smiled as she composed humanity's response. Tell them this is what happens when you spend 3 centuries dismissing the people who actually understand how your civilization works. General Patricia Moore stood in the command center buried beneath the Rocky Mountains, watching as galactic civilization began to unravel. The massive displays showed real-time status updates from across coalition space, red indicators for critical failures, yellow warnings for system degradation, and an alarming number of locations that had simply gone dark. Patricia had commanded Earth's most classified military program for 20 years. Operation Silent Thunder existed in files that most governments didn't know about, funded by budgets that appeared nowhere in official records. Its purpose was simple: identify every critical vulnerability in galactic civilization and prepare to exploit them if humanity's patience ever ran out. That time had come. General, Colonel Williams called from his monitoring station. The Arcturus system has lost primary power. Their fusion plants are shutting down in sequence, and they can't override the safety protocols. Patricia nodded calmly. Expected timeline? Based on our projections, they have 48 hours of emergency power remaining. After that, life support fails on 12 billion inhabitants. Patricia had spent decades studying the Coalition's greatest weakness. They had built their civilization on the assumption that its foundation would never be challenged. Humans had been part of that foundation for 3 centuries, maintaining systems, providing services, and ensuring critical operations continued smoothly. The Coalition had never asked what would happen if humans stopped cooperating. Status report. On the hyperspace relay network, Patricia requested. Captain Davis consulted her displays. 37% of relays are operating with significant delays. 15% are offline completely. The remaining networks are experiencing cascading failures as traffic reroutes through failing systems. The hyperspace relay network was the nervous system of galactic civilization. Every communication, every trade transaction, and every military coordination depended on instantaneous data transfer across thousands of light years. Humans had built and maintained significant portions of that network under subcontracts that coalition administrators had barely bothered to read. Now those same administrators were discovering what those contracts actually said about service. Termination. A priority communication came through from Earth's diplomatic corps. Ambassador Stone's voice filled the command center. General Moore, the Coalition Council has requested an emergency session. They want to negotiate. Patricia allowed herself a small smile. What are they offering? Full membership in the Inner Council, immediate voting rights, and recognition of human territorial claims. Stone's tone suggested he wasn't impressed. They also want assurances that current system failures are temporary technical problems rather than deliberate actions. What did you tell them? I told them that technical problems require technical solutions, and humanity is currently reviewing its service agreements with various coalition entities. Patricia pulled up the global status board that showed humanity's progress in demonstrating their importance to galactic civilization. The results were more dramatic than even her pessimistic projections had predicted. The Vegan Republic's agricultural worlds were facing famine as automated farming systems refused to accept commands. Human programmers had written the core algorithms that managed planting, harvesting, and distribution. When those programmers stopped providing updates and maintenance, the systems began reverting to default settings that were incompatible with non-Earth crops. The Betelgeuse Mining Consortium watched helplessly as their extraction equipment systematically broke down. The mining robots used human-designed navigation systems, human-programmed efficiency algorithms, and human-maintained safety protocols. Without human oversight, the robots began mining in random patterns, following safety procedures that brought all operations to a halt. Most critically, the interstellar banking system was experiencing what economists called catastrophic liquidity failure. The quantum computers that managed currency exchange, trade financing, and economic modeling had been programmed by human mathematicians using principles that only humans fully understood. As those systems began producing increasingly erratic results, panic spread through financial markets across the galaxy. General, Major Thompson reported from the intelligence section. We're receiving reports of civil unrest on 47 coalition worlds. The Altarian government has declared martial law. 3 minor species have petitioned to withdraw from the coalition and establish direct relations with Earth. Patricia had expected some of this. What surprised her was how quickly the coalition's political structure was crumbling. For 3 centuries, the galactic government had maintained stability through a careful balance of economic interdependence and military deterrence. But that stability depended on systems working, trade flowing, and everyone following established patterns. Humans had been the invisible foundation supporting all of it. Status on Operation Cornerstone? Patricia asked. Colonel Williams pulled up classified files that detailed humanity's most ambitious project. All primary objectives achieved, General. We have confirmed that human personnel were involved in critical operations across 84% of coalition infrastructure. Our withdrawal has created cascading failures in transportation, communication, manufacturing, and defense systems. Patricia walked to the central display that showed a real-time map of galactic civilization. Red zones indicated complete system failures. Yellow areas showed critical degradation. The few remaining green zones were either completely isolated from the greater coalition or had minimal dependence on human-maintained systems. General Moore, a new voice called from the communication center. Priority message from the Coalition Emergency Council. They're requesting immediate humanitarian assistance for the Arcturus crisis. Patricia read the message carefully. 12 billion people were facing death from system failures, and the coalition was asking humanity to help save them. The same coalition that had spent 3 centuries explaining why humans weren't qualified to make important decisions. Prepare a response, Patricia ordered. Tell them that humanity is prepared to provide emergency assistance under the following conditions. Immediate recognition of human sovereignty over all claimed territories. Full membership in all coalition governing bodies, and renegotiation of all existing treaties on equal terms. She paused, considering the weight of what she was about to say. Also tell them that this assistance will be provided by human personnel, operating under human authority, not as coalition contractors. If they want our help, they acknowledge that we're equals. The response came back within an hour. The Coalition Emergency Council had accepted all conditions without modification. For the first time in 3 centuries, humanity would be entering coalition space as equals rather than junior partners, but Patricia knew this was just the beginning. Accepting emergency assistance was one thing. Rebuilding an entire galactic civilization based on mutual respect rather than ancient prejudices would be much more difficult. General, Captain Davis called out. Earth Command is requesting projected timeline for Phase 5. Patricia looked at the displays showing the scope of galactic system failures, the growing list of species requesting human assistance, and the political chaos spreading across coalition space. 3 months ago, humanity had been a probationary member of galactic civilization. Now, they were being asked to save it. Tell Earth Command that Phase 5 can begin immediately, Patricia replied. The coalition has learned what happens when they underestimate human patience. Now it's time to teach them what happens when human patience is properly motivated. She turned to address her entire command staff. Ladies and gentlemen, we've successfully demonstrated that galactic civilization cannot function without human participation. Now we get to show them what galactic civilization looks like when humans are treated as equals. The displays around the command center began updating with new status reports. Green indicators started appearing as human teams accepted emergency deployment orders. Yellow warnings began shifting back to normal operations as human personnel returned to critical positions under new terms of employment. For the first time in 3 centuries, humans were going to work in coalition space as partners rather than employees. The galaxy was about to discover what they had been missing. 6 months after the collapse, Ambassador Sarah Martinez walked through the rebuilt halls of what was once the Galactic Coalition Council building. The architecture remained the same, but everything else had changed. Gone were the hierarchical seating arrangements that placed elder species above younger ones. Gone were the ceremonial protocols that emphasized ancient bloodlines over actual contributions. The new chamber was designed around a simple principle. Every species had an equal voice in decisions that affected them all. Sarah had been chosen as humanity's first representative to the reformed Galactic Assembly specifically because she had never worked for the old coalition. Her generation had grown up during humanity's silent withdrawal from galactic politics, and she brought no diplomatic baggage from the previous era of inequality. The morning session began with reports from species that were still recovering from what historians were already calling the Great Reckoning. The Altarian delegate spoke with none of the casual superiority that had once characterized her people's diplomatic style. Prime Minister Valdris, who had mocked human emotional instability just months earlier, now requested continued human assistance with their agricultural crisis. The Assembly recognizes the need for expanded human technical support in the Altarian system, Sarah responded formally. Earth's Agricultural Corps is prepared to provide additional specialists under the Standard Mutual Assistance Agreement. What made the exchange remarkable was how ordinary it sounded. No pleading, no desperate requests, no acknowledgement of past mistakes. Just one equal partner helping another solve a problem. This was how Sarah's generation preferred to handle diplomacy. Focus on results, ignore ancient grudges, and build. something better than what came before. Councillor Thex of the Valdorian Republic addressed the assembly next. His crystalline form had lost much of its luminous quality over the past months, a sign of stress among his species. The assembly seeks guidance regarding the restoration of quantum banking systems. Our economic recovery remains dependent on human expertise in computational mathematics. Sarah consulted her notes. The Reformed Banking Consortium has identified 17 Valdorian specialists qualified for advanced training in quantum financial modeling. Human instructors can begin the education program within 30 days. Again, the exchange was deliberately mundane. No mention of how Valdorian arrogance had contributed to the crisis. No reminder that their people had dismissed human mathematical abilities as chaotic and unreliable. Sarah's instructions from Earth were clear. Look forward, not backward, but not everyone was adapting well to the new reality. The Tellurian military commander, General Koth, stood with obvious reluctance. His four arms remained rigidly positioned in what humans had learned was a gesture of barely controlled anger among his species. The assembly must address the military imbalance created by recent developments. Humanity's undisclosed capabilities represent a threat to regional stability. The chamber fell silent. This was the conversation everyone had been avoiding for months. During the crisis, coalition military forces had discovered that humanity possessed capabilities far beyond anything in their databases. Ships that could outmaneuver anything in space, weapons that could penetrate the strongest shields, technology that seemed to violate basic principles of physics. Sarah had been prepared for this moment. General Koth, perhaps you could clarify which specific capabilities concern you. Koth's translated voice carried clear frustration. Human vessels demonstrate impossible acceleration profiles, sensor invisible stealth systems, and weapons that appear to target weaknesses that should not be detectable. Sarah nodded calmly. General, those capabilities were developed over 3 centuries of careful research and engineering. Humanity shared this technology with coalition partners as appropriate under existing treaties. If the coalition chose not to request access to additional human innovations, that was a diplomatic decision, not a technical limitation. She paused, letting the implications sink in. However, under the new mutual development protocols, all assembly members have access to proposed joint research initiatives. If Tellurian scientists wish to collaborate with human engineers on advanced propulsion systems, Earth's Research Council would be happy to consider such a proposal. President James Wilson appeared on the main display via holographic projection from Earth. His presence always changed the atmosphere in the assembly chamber. Wilson had led humanity through the transition from galactic outcasts to galactic leaders, and his words carried weight that transcended traditional diplomatic protocol. Distinguished delegates, Wilson began, his voice filling the chamber with quiet authority. 6 months ago, this galaxy faced a choice: continue with a system that measured worth by age rather than contribution, or build something new based on mutual respect and shared responsibility. Wilson's image looked directly at General Koth. General, you express concern about humanity's military capabilities. Let me address that directly. Yes, humanity possesses advanced technology. Yes, we developed these capabilities without coalition oversight. And yes, we are prepared to use them if necessary. The chamber remained absolutely silent. Wilson continued, but we prefer to use our capabilities for construction rather than destruction. The choice of which path we follow depends entirely on how we treat each other going forward. Sarah watched the reactions around the chamber. Some delegates showed fear, others curiosity, but most displayed the careful attention of people who were finally hearing the truth after centuries of diplomatic fiction. The old coalition failed because it was based on the assumption that some species were inherently superior to others, Wilson explained. The reformed assembly succeeds because it recognizes that every species brings unique strengths to our shared civilization. He gestured toward data displays that showed recovery statistics across Coalition space. Altarian agricultural worlds are producing record harvests with human farming techniques. Valdorian quantum computers are processing data faster than ever, before using human algorithms. Tellurian military vessels are being refitted with human defensive systems that make them nearly invulnerable. Wilson paused, allowing the implications to register. This is what cooperation looks like when it's based on equality rather than hierarchy. A new delegate stood to address the assembly. Commander Torres of the Sigma Draconis Republic was one of the few military officers who had adapted quickly to the new reality. President Wilson, my people wish to understand humanity's long-term intentions. Will Earth seek to dominate this new assembly as previous elder species dominated the old coalition? Sarah smiled at the question. It was exactly the kind of direct inquiry that the new diplomatic protocols were designed to encourage. Commander Torres, humanity's intentions are quite simple. We want to live in a galaxy where problems are solved through cooperation rather than coercion, where decisions are made based on expertise rather than ancestry, and where every species has the opportunity to contribute their best capabilities to our shared prosperity. She stood and walked to the center of the chamber, something that would have been unthinkable under the old protocols. But let me be absolutely clear about one thing. Humanity will never again accept second-class status in any organization we help to maintain. The days of asking permission to be treated as equals are over. Wilson's hologram nodded approvingly. The reformed assembly operates on a simple principle. Contribute according to your abilities, benefit according to your contributions. Species that choose to participate as full partners will find humanity to be generous allies. Species that attempt to recreate the old hierarchies will discover that human patience, while extensive, is not unlimited. General Koth made one final attempt to reassert traditional military thinking. President Wilson, surely you acknowledge that some species have more experience in galactic governance than others. Wisdom comes with age. Wilson's expression didn't change, but something in his tone grew noticeably colder. General Koth, the Tellurian Empire has existed for 8,000 years. In that time, your people have fought 17 major wars, enslaved 6 species, and contributed to the extinction of 3 civilizations. If that's what you call wisdom, humanity prefers our relative youth. The chamber fell silent again. But this time, the silence carried a different quality. It was the silence of old assumptions crumbling in the face of new realities. Sarah stepped forward to address the assembly one final time. Delegates, we stand at a unique moment in galactic history. We can choose to repeat the patterns that led to the recent crisis, or we can build something unprecedented. A truly cooperative civilization where every species contributes their strengths and shares in the benefits. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes or sensors or consciousness fields of delegates from dozens of different species. Humanity offers partnership, not domination. We offer cooperation, not conquest. But we also offer a clear warning. The galaxy tried dismissing human contributions once. The results speak for themselves. Wilson's hologram began to fade as Earth's transmission ended, but his final words echoed clearly through the chamber. The choice is yours, delegates. Build with us, or rebuild without us, but never again assume that humanity will quietly accept less than we deserve. As delegates began filing out of the chamber for the midday recess, Sarah reviewed the morning's progress. 3 species had formally requested human technical assistance. 2 had proposed joint research initiatives. 1 had quietly inquired about establishing permanent diplomatic missions on Earth. Most importantly, nobody had questioned humanity's right to be heard as equals. Sarah's communication device chimed with a message from Earth. The latest polls showed overwhelming support for humanity's new role in galactic affairs. More significantly, recruitment for the Colonial Development Corps had increased by 400%. Young humans were excited about the possibility of helping to build a better galaxy. As Sarah prepared for the afternoon session, she reflected on how much had changed in just 6 months. The species that had once dismissed humanity as too young, too emotional, and too primitive were now looking to human leadership for solutions to their most critical problems. The galaxy had learned that underestimating humanity carried a price. Now they were discovering what happened when humanity's patience was rewarded rather than exploited. For the first time in 3 centuries, humans were building the future rather than just maintaining someone else's past. And that future looked brighter than anyone had imagined possible.